Hi there, I'm Mark Burnett, and this is my challenge to complete 40 tracks in a year. Not just any year, 2020. So we're already in week 4 of January, and I'm working on the 3rd track. So what I've been doing is finding tracks that are kind of like this and opening them up and going, oh my God, what was I doing? Because they're quite often a bit of a mess. And what it looks like with this track, I mean, this was already version 10, so I've pulled out the last version that I could find in the archive. And what I'm guessing is by the time I got to version 10, I was already pretty close to looking to print stuff out. And what it seems like is going on here on the right is that I've got a whole bunch of audio tracks. So I've basically frozen all the audio from, I suspect, all of the tracks that exist under here. Although when I look at them, they don't all match up. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle here, all of this weird pile, big long shit, extra shit, more extra shit, shit bum, and shit collector. I mean, there's like a whole bunch of shit literally in the middle here that's doing something. What it's doing, we'll try and decipher a little bit. But yeah, basically I needed to work out exactly what all of that's doing, what of it was necessary and what parts of it weren't necessary. In the end, I decided to delete all the frozen stuff because it was all still here as instruments. And at the beginning was just the objective was just to clean up the set. So get rid of anything that's not necessary, clear it all up so that I can sort of focus on the elements that are important. And that was fairly straightforward because all of this freeze stuff here was just frozen versions of the lower tracks. And the reason that I didn't go with the frozen versions was because I wasn't 100% sure where I left off with this in what I was working towards with the mix, and whether I was 100% sure that that was the final arrangement. So in order to give me the freedom to reprint these tracks and make any changes instrumentally that I might need to make, I stuck with the kind of original tracks. Now, all this stuff in the middle took me a little bit of time to work out, but basically what I worked out was that this and this are basically just generating bass parts, actually, and drum hits that are being fed into, that are being, I mean, look at this. This is crazy. So I've got this pile, which is a group, okay? And then in here, I've got an operator thing. So let's just have a quick listen to that. Yeah, so me experimenting with bass, I mean, that's basically what was going on here. And I discovered that what I'm doing here is I'm pulling from 2 different sounds. This one also goes then out to pile, which then goes into other tracks. So on these other tracks, I've got basically 3 different distortions. Why I have 3 different distortions on separate tracks, I'm not entirely sure, but I did. I mean, I really was getting heavily deep on distorting stuff. And yeah, basically that's what's going on. And I figured out that when I did this weird chain where I put a whole bunch of stuff through a whole bunch of processing with loads and loads of distortion, I was getting these really, really interesting artifacts when the notes were transitioning. And that's what leads to these bass sounds and these ending transitions, which is what's going on here. Which I really like. And that plays an important part in the track. But once I'd worked out what all that routing was and how that was all going to work, it was then possible for me to delete all of the stuff that wasn't necessary. And then we came to, let's just have a look here. So here you can see I've reorganized the track, so it's a bit more how I would conventionally organize them, with the beats at the top and then bass and then the other stuff moving down. And you can see it's actually a lot simpler. And this was just the stripped down version of what you saw in the last project. So first I just got rid of all the rubbish. So let's call that organizing or cleaning up. And then what I did was I listened through it, obviously, and I looked to simplify anything that was going on. So Obviously, I don't have anything on the master here. I was just using a limiter to turn the volume up a bit. I just went through every channel and I just had a look if there was anything on there that wasn't active, wasn't being used, was superfluous to the overall delivery, and I just got rid of it or simplified it in some way or other, to end up with what was essentially a straight version of the track. And that's what I ended up here. So I'm going to bring up now the latest version. So the latest version has a bit of work done on the arrangement. I've basically looked to extend some of the parts that were a bit coming in quite late on in the track and bring them a bit forward. I've reorganized the first 64 bars considerably because I just felt that it was not really necessary. The suspense of 64 bars before getting any bass really wasn't necessary. Just waiting as long as 24, 25 bars, so like nearly a minute in, is also, you know, by modern standards, a lengthy and suspenseful intro. And that was the main part of the track. So you can see that it looks a bit different. The other thing that I did was I also reintroduced this noise actually pretty much all the way through the track, because I felt that there was a certain character that was adding to the whole track, or to the sections that it was in, that made it too much of a it just sounded too different, the two sections where there was noise and where there wasn't. And I actually really liked that texture, so I put that all the way through. And then the major changes were just moving the bass line forward and shortening this initial intro, making it a bit more interesting. And once I'd done the arrangement, then I kind of added a few more details. So these bottom 4 tracks here are the only new things that I've added to this track. And they're basically very simple tonal rises. And all of these parts are resampled from within the track here. So it's all sounds that I've basically re-recorded, reversed, added effects to, whatever it was necessary to basically build some interesting transitional sounds. And I'll just give you an example of one of them. So this is kind of... Yeah, so I went for this, again, this trick where I've used muting in the middle here. I'm not sure if that's here, that's happening on the master track now. Just to build these, just to make these transitions a bit more interesting. And I've also done some sampling of the lead Santuri part and kind of twisted that a little bit too. Yeah, to just to ease some of these transitions that sort of seemed like instruments were suddenly jumping in without any kind of, introduction or anything. One thing that I think you find possibly really interesting, and this is to do with this Santuri ARP part, which I'll just play you a little bit of now. So let me just solo this out. Yeah, so you can see here on this track, this really was obviously the focus. I mean, I've got a ridiculous amount of automation going on here, and what's interesting is that a lot of this is literally live recorded in. I mean, you can tell that by the number of data points and the fact that these aren't straight lines. One or two of these tracks I have just gone through and tidied up a bit. I've turned them into smaller sections of data points because I just felt that there needed to be a better consistency, especially with this because it's the gain for the track, and I didn't really need lots of micro variations or these kind of, there's just this human error. It just makes it easier to work with going into the mix bus when that's kind of constant, and or at least the changes are much more calculated and more progressive and consistent. So, but a lot of the other stuff, which is a lot of the controls that were actually embedded already in this instrument rack. Yeah, so I've kind of multi-mapped a whole bunch of stuff, and then I've just gone to town with the push, jamming it out over the top when I was originally creating the track. So there was a lot of automation in there. And I know that there's always a temptation to go through and start regimenting this and giving it a bit more order. But actually, again, I didn't really want to do that. The only part where I really did that was here with this one transition, because I just felt that that the arpeggiator timing was just a little bit too clunky here. So instead of relying on the synchronized arpeggiator here, what I did was I switched the arpeggiator into free mode, which resulted in a kind of much smoother rate change rather than this stepped rate change. Yeah, because before it was kind of a bit more stepped, a bit like this section. Yeah, this stuff that's going on here. I know that's delay. I just basically did a little bit of work on that, but I've left the rest exactly how it was. And there was a huge temptation to edit and play with this part because I'd kind of, I'd done some editing and some rearrangement. But in the end, I thought if there's one part in this track that really was kind of me playing the push, playing my instrument, there was a take, it really was this part, and I really wanted to preserve that as far as possible. So that was kind of the majority of the work that I had to do there. I really get into this envelope follower stuff. I've done, what did I do here? So we've got these chords. Now this is quite interesting. So I was playing around with the EQ on these chords, and I discovered that sweeping quite a serious bell curve through the mids and upper mids here was quite a cool effect. And I guess I just kind of had that whole concept in mind because I'd been using these envelope followers here that are associated with the kick drum. One of them here. And I'd actually gone to town and added even more. So I was using this same sort of envelope following concept here with the kick drum to control a whole bunch of other parameters. It's just movement, and I really like the way that kind of glues the track together. Although I get a feeling there might be a little bit too much reverb on those. But again, the overall sound of the track at the moment, I'm pretty happy with. And when you're happy with something, don't go in looking for problems. It's best to just listen to the track, and if you identify a problem, if you can hear something, then go in and try and fix that. But don't kind of go out of your way to find problems, because there's loads of problems that I could find in this if I went in to look for things that didn't seem right or didn't seem to fit the sort of convention of how you should do this or how you should do that. So again, that's kind of been another thing that I've had to learn, is not to get too far into it, because obviously it's my production and I could go really deep into correcting things, but I've tried to keep that, not adding more parts unless they are literally, these kind of really accessory cherry on the cake type components that are just going to really make the transitions work better or highlight something. And the rest of it is just using the parts that were already there with some very small adjustments. I mean, tiny little details like this little intro to the swish drum loop here. You know, really simple. It just takes the edge off that particular transition. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to go through now and have a go at the mix. I'm not going to, in this video, go through a whole bunch of mixing stuff. I think it's too much. What I've been doing is choosing the easy stuff first to a certain degree, which is never normally a good idea, but it's also not a good idea to fail at the start because then you get nowhere. So putting a few easier tracks, i.e. nearly pretty much finished tracks at the beginning, has obviously helped to improve my sense of confidence over this project and give me more the sense that I can achieve this. And it's also equipped me with a little bit more understanding of how to get through relatively efficiently and relatively quickly the very final stages of getting a track finished. So as ever, if you like what you see, click on the like button. If you want to see more of it, click on the subscribe button. Really appreciate all the support I've been getting. It's fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to what 2020 is going to bring for all of us. See you next week.